I used to believe that love, when it comes from a grandmother, was something too pure to be questioned, too sacred to be betrayed. I thought the bond between me and my first grandchild was unbreakable, woven from the same threads of devotion that tied me to my own children. But I was wrong, and that realization, when it came, didn't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, like a slow frost that spread across the garden of my heart, one petal at a time. He was my first grandchild, my miracle baby, the one who made me a grandmother before I was ready to admit I was getting older. When he was born, I felt the world shift. I bought him his first blanket, embroidered with his initials. I whispered promises to him that no one heard, promises that I would always be there, that I would always protect him, that I would love him more than life itself. And I did. For years, that boy was the center of my world. I was there for every school recital, every scraped knee, every broken toy. I made pancakes shaped like stars, just because he liked them that way. I drove across town in the rain to watch him play soccer, even when my arthritis made the steering wheel feel like it was biting into my palms. He'd run to me after every game, sweaty, smiling, and proud. And he'd say, "Grandma, did you see me score?" And I'd always say, "Of course I did, baby." I saw everything. I saw everything. I saw him grow taller. I saw his voice deepen. I saw the day he stopped calling me Grandma and started saying, "Brenda," as if that single word could make him feel more grown up. I laughed it off at first. I told myself it was normal, that young people always try to pull away as they grow. But deep down, I felt it. The distance, the quiet disrespect disguised as independence. When he went to college, I told him not to worry about money. I said, "You focus on your studies, baby. Grandma's got you." And I meant it. I sent him care packages, snacks, gift cards, new shoes. I paid his rent when he fell behind, told him to just get his degree and make me proud. And for a while, that was enough. But somewhere along the line, helping him turned into funding him, and loving him turned into being used by him. It started with small things, a request here, a promise there. "Grandma, can I borrow a little extra this month?" "Grandma, my car broke down." "Grandma, I'll pay you back as soon as my refund check comes." The words, "I'll pay you back," became a lullaby that I kept believing in, even when I knew better. I told myself it was just a phase. I told myself, he's young, he's struggling. But it wasn't youth. It was entitlement. And I had been feeding it spoon by spoon, check by check. By the time I realized how deep it went, I had already drained a good part of my savings. Not because I had to, but because I wanted him to feel supported. Because I thought, if I give enough, maybe he'll see how much I love him. That's the lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? That love can be measured in what we give. But love that isn't respected becomes charity, and charity without gratitude becomes exploitation. I remember the first time I said no. He had called one evening, sounding casual, confident. "Hey, Grandma, I need about $800 to cover something for school. I'll send it right back next week." But that week, I had already paid my property taxes. I had medications due. So I said gently, "Baby, I can't this month." There was a pause, a long one. Then he said, "You always say family comes first. Guess that doesn't apply anymore." And that sentence, cold, careless, cut deeper than anything before. I hung up, sat in the quiet of my kitchen, and stared at the calendar on the wall. The days looked blurry. I realized I couldn't even remember the last time he called just to ask how I was feeling. That night I made a list of everything I had given, not to shame him, but to see it with my own eyes, to wake myself up $200 for his car repairs, $2,600 for tuition when he lost his scholarship paperwork, $480 for groceries during the pandemic, $300 for his birthday because he said his friends were all going out, when not $800 to cover his moving expenses, and countless little transactions, $50 here, $75 there, Venmo and Cash App and crumpled bills folded into his palm at family dinners. By the time I finished, it was over $10,000. $10,000. 10,000 hopes. 10,000 tiny cuts that I thought were gestures of love, and not once did he say, "Thank you." I didn't cut him off right away. That's the thing about love. It makes fools out of the kindest hearts. I told myself maybe he was just stressed. Maybe he didn't realize how his words had hurt me. So I kept the door open, even if it was just a crack. He started calling less often, but when he did, his voice had that same smooth charm I used to find so endearing. "Hey, Grandma," he'd say, dragging out the word like honey. "You're my favorite person, you know that?" And every time my guard softened, because that's what manipulators count on, the echo of the affection they used to give. A few months later, he came home for Thanksgiving. I spent 3 days preparing everything just right. I made his favorite cornbread stuffing, glazed ham, and that lemon meringue pie he always used to ask for as a boy. I even ironed the good tablecloth, the one I keep for Christmas. When he walked in, he gave me a half hug, the kind you give someone when your mind's somewhere else. "Hey, Grandma," he said, scrolling on his phone. "Smells good in here." He didn't notice the candles I'd lit, didn't ask how I'd been. He went straight to the living room, sat down, and started talking about himself, his new job, his friends, the big moves he was planning. Every word sounded like a performance. I watched him laugh with his cousins, loud and confident, as if the weight of his debts had evaporated. No mention of repayment, no trace of humility. Just a young man basking in admiration, telling everyone how he was killing it. When I offered him leftovers to take home, he said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And then, before leaving, slipped in, "Hey, could you cover my gas money for the trip back?" Gas money! After all that cooking, all that effort, all that hope for connection, he wanted gas money, and I gave it to him. Of course I did, because in that moment my love was stronger than my pride. But love, when it's one-sided, starts to rot. By spring, he had a new pattern, texting only when he needed something. Hey, Grandma," followed by, "Can I ask a favor?" I remember one message so clearly it might as well be tattooed on my memory. He wrote, "You've always believed in me. You know how hard it is for me right now? I just need one last push." That one last push was $1,500, supposedly for a work certification that would change everything. I told myself, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the moment. He grows up. Weeks passed. No certificate, no call, no thank you. When I finally asked him how it went, he said, "Oh yeah, that didn't work out. But I'm thinking of something better now." He said it like he was talking about a bad TV show, something not worth revisiting. I could feel something cracking inside me that day. Not rage, but exhaustion, a kind of deep, bone-level sadness. I started to notice how small he'd made me feel, how careful I'd become with my words, afraid to upset him, how my joy depended on the tone of his text messages. That's not love. That's control. disguised as affection. One night, my friend Evelyn came over for tea. She's known me for 40 years, through 2 marriages, 3 moves, and 1 too many heartbreaks. She looked at me and said, "Brenda, you look tired in your soul." And I couldn't even argue. I told her about the money, about how I couldn't even talk to him without feeling like I was walking on eggshells. Evelyn didn't say much. She just leaned back and said softly, "Baby, if he's only showing up when your wallet's open, he's not visiting his grandmother. He's visiting the bank." That sentence hit me harder than anything my grandson had ever said, because it was the truth I'd been avoiding. I had become a bank with feelings, and feelings don't pay interest. Still, I wasn't ready to face it. Not completely, I told myself. Maybe I was being harsh. Maybe I should be patient. That's what grandmothers do, right? We forgive. We endure. But forgiveness without accountability becomes permission, and I had given him years of permission to use me. Then came the birthday, his 24th. I mailed him a card with $200 inside, a tradition I'd kept since he was a child. Weeks passed. No call, no text, nothing. Finally, I asked his mother, my daughter, if he got it. She sighed and said, "Yeah, he mentioned it. Said it was nice of you. Nice of me. $200, a handwritten letter, and all he could manage was nice." That night, I cried. Not because of the money, but because I realized how completely invisible I had become to the person I loved most. But the final straw came a few months later, in the most humiliating way. He posted a photo on social media. A brand new car, shiny and expensive, with a caption that said, "Self-made, no handouts, just hard work and hustle." I sat there staring at that screen, feeling something hot and cold twist in my chest. Self-made, no handouts. That car, that smile, that caption. It was all built on the quiet sacrifices I'd made behind closed doors. My handouts had built his self-made empire. And that's when I realized he wasn't just taking my money, he was taking my dignity too. I didn't sleep the night I saw that post, the image of that car, that smug little smile. It burned behind my eyelids. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, that maybe he'd just phrased it wrong. But deep down, I knew better. He was rewriting the story. In his version, I didn't exist. I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, surrounded by silence. The kind of silence that hums in your ears, where the refrigerator's low buzz feels like a heartbeat. My tea had gone cold hours ago, and in front of me I had a notepad. I started writing. At first, just random notes. But the words turned into numbers, and the numbers turned into confession. $10 for ice cream after every game. $200 for his first phone. $300 for that school trip to D.C. He begged to go on. $600 for his first car insurance. $1,500 when he dropped. Out of college the first time. $2,800 when he enrolled again, swearing he'd changed. $75 here. $50 there. Gas money. Birthday cards. Emergencies that always seemed to happen on Fridays. I kept writing until my pen stuttered against the edge of the page. When I added it all up, the number looked wrong. Too big, too unbelievable. So I grabbed my old calculator, the one with the faded buttons. The total blinked back at me. $24,630. $24,630. That was more than what I made in a whole year at my first job. More than the down payment I made on this house. More than I'd ever spent on myself. I looked at that number and realized this wasn't generosity anymore. This was grief in the form of transactions. Every transfer, every Venmo, every envelope was my way of begging to stay relevant in his life. He wasn't asking for money. He was asking, "How much are you willing to pay for my love?" And I kept answering, "Whatever it takes." The next morning I decided to test something. I didn't text him, I didn't call, I didn't send a "How are you?" or a "Need anything?" message. I wanted to see if he'd reach out just to talk. 1 week passed. Nothing. 2 weeks. Nothing. By the 3rd week, I got my answer. Not in a phone call, but in a text. "Hey, Grandma. Hope you're doing good. Can you send $300? Need it. For rent. Promise I'll pay you back soon." There it was. No. "How's your knee?" No. "Miss you." Just another invoice disguised as affection. And something inside me finally broke. Not in anger, but in clarity. Because I realized the saddest truth of all. He didn't love me. He loved what I could give. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my phone, reading his message over and over. Then for the first time in my life, I didn't reply. That silence. It was terrifying at first, because when you've spent years being needed, you forget how to exist without being useful. But as the hours passed, I started to feel something strange. Peace. It wasn't the loud, triumphant kind of peace that comes with victory. It was quiet, still, like the hush that comes after a storm has torn through your town, and all that's left is the sound of dripping water and the smell of wet earth. I went to my mirror that night, looked at the tired woman staring back at me, and whispered, "You've given enough." And for the first time in years, I believed it. But the world has a cruel sense of timing. Just when I thought I could slip into this new silence, my phone rang. It was his mother, my daughter. "Mom," she said, "he's upset. Says you're ignoring him." "I'm not ignoring him," I said quietly. "I'm healing." She sighed. "He told me you're being dramatic, that you always make him feel guilty for asking for help." I felt my stomach twist. Even now he was rewriting the story, painting himself as the victim, me as the manipulator, and my own daughter believed him. That's when the tears came. Not the sharp, sobbing kind, but the heavy, silent ones that fall without warning. Because I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about legacy, about how easily love can be twisted when gratitude disappears. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my old journal. Inside were letters I'd written to my late husband. He used to say, "Bren, people show you who they are when you stop giving them what they want." So I wrote one last entry. Not for him, not for my grandson, but for myself. I loved him with everything I had. I gave him more than I should have. But I cannot keep financing the very thing that's breaking me. From this day forward, I will give only where love is reciprocated, and I will save the rest for the people who see me. Not for what I have, but for who I am. I closed that journal, placed it on the nightstand, and took a deep breath. That was the night I stopped being just a grandmother. That was the night I became a woman reclaiming her worth. It's strange how the moment you wake up isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper that settles deep in your spirit and quietly rearranges the furniture of your mind. For me, it happened on a Sunday morning. The sun was pouring through the curtains, the way it always does when spring finally starts to trust the world again. I was watering my violets, those fragile purple blooms I've kept alive for nearly a decade. My husband used to say they were stubborn little things, just like you. I leaned over the pot, and one of the flowers had wilted completely. I almost threw it away, but when I touched the soil, It was bone dry. Not dead, just thirsty. And that's when it hit me. I hadn't been dying. I had just been pouring my water into the wrong soil. All these years, I kept trying to bloom in someone else's desert. I gave and gave until my roots were brittle. All because I believed love was about how much I could prove. But love that needs proof is never love. It's a transaction. I set down the watering can, sat at the table and whispered, "No more begging for appreciation." That sentence changed everything. Later that day, I got a text from my grandson again. "Hey, Grandma, you still mad? I could really use your help again. I'll swing by later." The old me would have dropped everything, would have baked cookies, brewed coffee, and waited at the door, pretending not to be hurt just to keep him close. But not this time. This time, I looked at that message, felt the familiar ache in my chest, and didn't reply. Instead, I put on my shoes, grabbed my purse, and drove to the community center down the road. It was something I'd been meaning to do for months. Evelyn had told me about a youth mentorship program there. They needed volunteers to help local kids with college applications, interview prep, things like that. Kids who didn't have grandparents or parents or anyone cheering them on. When I walked in, I didn't know what to expect. But the moment, those kids looked up, eyes bright, notebooks open, ready to learn. It felt like something inside me clicked back into place. One girl, maybe 17, asked shyly, "Are you really going to help us write essays for free?" I smiled and said, "Honey, I've been giving for free my whole life, but this time it's going to the right people." Over the next few weeks, I kept showing up every Thursday afternoon. I'd sit with them, go over their drafts, listen to their dreams. One boy told me he wanted to be an engineer but couldn't afford application fees. I brought in an envelope the next day with enough to cover 2 schools. And for the first time in years, giving didn't hurt. Because these kids said thank you. They looked me in the eye. They sent follow-up texts that didn't start with, "Can you?" but with, "I did it." I started keeping a little notebook, not of money given, but of moments that fed my soul. The first college acceptance letter one of them got. The smile on the girl's face when she finished her essay. The way they called me Miss Brenda with respect in their voices, not expectation. It wasn't about being needed anymore. It was about being seen. One evening, I came home after another long day at the center. My house felt different, lighter somehow. I made myself a cup of tea, sat in the same kitchen where I'd once wept over that list of debts, and realized something simple but profound. I had stopped checking my phone. No more waiting for messages that never came. No more hoping for calls filled with empty promises. The silence that used to scare me had become my peace. I looked out the window at the setting sun, and for the first time, it didn't remind me of endings. It reminded me of resets. I whispered again. I'm still a grandmother. I'm just no longer his, not in the sense of cutting him off completely, but in the sense of refusing to mother a grown man who confuses kindness with weakness. Love should lift, not drain. And I finally understood that boundaries are not cruelty. They're self-respect in motion. A week later, he showed up at my door, unannounced, uninvited. He stood there with that same confident smirk, phone in hand. "Hey, Grandma," he said. "Figured I'd check on you." There was a time that tone would have melted me. This time, it just made me tired. He glanced past me into the living room, maybe expecting to see envelopes or gifts waiting. "You okay? You've been kinda distant lately." I smiled softly and said, "Yes, baby. I've been distant from the chaos." He frowned, not quite understanding. "I mean, if I did something wrong." I shook my head. "You didn't do something wrong, sweetheart. You just kept doing nothing right." He blinked, unsure if it was a joke. It wasn't. "I still love you," I said, "but I've learned that love without gratitude is like a song without melody. I'm done singing alone." He didn't argue, just stood there, shifting awkwardly, realizing, maybe for the first time, that I wasn't going to fix anything, this time. When he left, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I simply closed the door, turned the lock, and exhaled. The air felt clean. That was the day I understood what healing really looks like. It isn't revenge. It isn't proving them wrong. It's standing in your own kitchen, tea in hand, smiling at your reflection, and realizing you don't need anyone to validate your worth anymore. It's when you finally redirect your energy, not away from love, but toward yourself and those who value it. The thing about peace is that, once you taste it, chaos loses its flavor. After my grandson's visit, the house felt different, not empty, just calm. I brewed a fresh pot of tea, sat in the sunlight spilling across my table, and realized I hadn't felt that kind of steadiness in years. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to call. I wasn't rehearsing speeches, in my head or checking my phone every 10 minutes. Silence had become my sanctuary. But peace, I learned, isn't the same as isolation. It's space, the kind that invites the right people in. Stage 1. Replanting. Evelyn was the first to notice the change. "Girl," she said one morning as we folded clothes at the community center drive, "you've got that glow again." I laughed. "That's not glow, that's freedom." She winked. "Well, whatever it is, bottle it. Women could use a sip." I started using the time I used to spend worrying to learn. I took a free online class in small business bookkeeping, something I'd always found interesting but never had time for. By summer, I was volunteering at a local thrift boutique run by the center. I helped them organize donations, balance their accounts, and teach other retirees how to handle online sales. Within 3 months, we doubled the boutique's revenue. The director, a soft-spoken woman named Lila, offered me a modest stipend. I almost refused. Old habits die hard. But Evelyn nudged me and whispered, "Take it. You earned it." So I did. Not because I needed the money, but because it felt good to be needed for something real. Stage 2. The ripple word spread about the boutique's turnaround. People started asking me for advice. How to manage budgets. How to stretch retirement checks. How to teach their grandkids about money without enabling them. Each question felt like a small redemption, proof that my mistakes could become somebody else's map. I began hosting a weekly workshop called The Giving Tree Without Losing Your Roots. We'd sit in a circle, 10 or 12 of us, sharing stories of overgiving and learning to say no with grace. Some cried, some laughed, but all of us healed together. The first night, I ended with this. Boundaries don't mean you love less. They mean you finally love right. The room went quiet, then filled with gentle applause, the kind that says we understand. Stage 3. The return of the prodigal. Months passed. Then one Saturday, I got a letter. Not a text, not an email. A real letter. It was from him. "Grandma, I owe you more than money. I owe you an apology. I lost myself trying to look successful, and I hurt you in the process. I saw the workshops online. You're helping people. I guess you always were meant to help, just not in the way I thought. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I read it twice. My hand shook, not from anger, but from release. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you give for them. It's something you do, so you can keep walking without dragging the past behind you. I wrote back, I'm proud of the man you're trying to become. I've forgiven you already, but from now on, love between us must live in honesty, not in transactions. I sealed the letter, mailed it, and felt lighter than air. Stage 4. The harvest by autumn. The community center asked if they could feature me in the local paper. Just a small piece, Lila said, about your workshops, how you turned pain into purpose. I agreed, reluctantly. The article ran with a photo of me standing beside the thrift shop's window display, smiling in my favorite yellow cardigan. The headline read, From Broken Heart to Open Hand. How one grandmother turned. Loss into legacy. Within days, donations poured in. People I'd never met stopped me in the grocery store to say thank you. One woman said, You made me call my mother. Another said, You saved me from repeating your story. That's when I understood what my husband meant when he said, Life gives interest back on kindness. It just takes time to mature. Stage 5. The quiet triumph. I didn't become rich. I didn't get revenge, but I did something better. I got restored. I remodeled the spare room into a study, soft lamps, shelves of donated books, and a little desk where I write letters to people who need encouragement. Sometimes I send them, anonymously, signed simply, From Someone Who Understands. I travel occasionally now. Nothing fancy. Bus trips to nearby towns, volunteering at shelters, teaching budgeting at senior centers. Everywhere I go, I meet people who remind me that gratitude still exists, and sometimes, when the sun hits just right through my kitchen window, I think about that boy I once called my world. I still love him, just differently. My love for him is no longer an open checkbook. It's a quiet prayer that he'll find the same kind of peace I found after losing me. So yes, my heart was broken. But hearts are funny things. They don't just break. They grow new chambers. Mine beats slower now, steadier, and every pulse whispers the same truth. Redirected love is not lost love. It's love finally pointed where it can bloom. People always ask me, Brenda, how do you forgive someone who broke your heart? And I tell them, forgiveness isn't a gift you hand to the one who hurt you. It's the key you use to unlock your own cage. When you give everything to someone who doesn't value it, the loss isn't just money or time, it's identity. You start to confuse being needed with being loved, and when that need disappears, you feel like you disappear too. But you don't. You were always there, just buried under obligation and guilt. Learn that love isn't measured by sacrifice, it's measured by reciprocity, by the quiet balance between giving and receiving. And boundaries, they're not walls, they're doors with locks, and the right people always knock. These days, my mornings start with gratitude. I brew my tea, open the windows, and write 3 things I'm thankful for. Sometimes it's something small, the way sunlight warms my kitchen tiles, or how the air smells after rain. Sometimes it's big, the laughter of the kids at the center, the peace that hums in my chest when I fall asleep. I'm not the same woman who begged for appreciation. I'm not the woman who counted her worth in dollars given away. I'm a woman who learned that even broken hearts can become lighthouses. You just have to stop standing in the storm and start shining from the shore. To anyone listening who's been where I've been, Maybe it's a child, a grandchild, a partner, a friend, someone you loved who turned your kindness into currency. I want you to hear me clearly. You are not foolish for giving. You are generous for believing. But there comes a time when belief must turn into wisdom. That's not bitterness. That's maturity. The same love that made you vulnerable will also make you strong if you let it evolve. I used to think my story ended in heartbreak. Now I know it was only the prologue. The real story began the moment I said, "No more," and meant it. Because healing isn't about closing your heart. It's about redirecting the flow toward people, places, and purposes that water you back. That's the legacy I want to leave. Not the money I lost, but the peace I found. Not the grandson who left, but the dozens of young souls who found a grandmother in me. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this: give freely, but only where gratitude grows. Love deeply, but never at the expense of yourself. And when your heart breaks, don't curse the fracture, because that's where the light finds its way in.